On to item number 11.
Item number 11, Stage 3 Drought Update.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, council members, Joshua Hagmark, Water Resources Manager, here for another Stage 3 Drought Update. Outline for our agenda today is talk about weather forecasts that remain for the season, community conservation, our changing water supply strategy, which I hope to get some input from and direction from the council today, lake and reservoir operations, capital projects, and update, and a water conservation program update. So the highlight of the NOAA prediction right now is above average temperatures. That's what I can take away. There may be a rainfall in April, but it does not appear there's going to be anything that's going to change the game. Certainly we'll take anything we can get and be thankful for it, but it doesn't appear that there's anything that's going to change our water supply strategy at this point. Rainfall for the water year, as of today, as of March 14th, we were at 59% of normal for Gibraltar. Certainly the lack of rainfall that's forecasted for the next 2 weeks is not going to help that situation out, and we anticipate that falling below 50% by the end of the month. On the bright side, the community continues to rack up some impressive conservation numbers with 30% conservation in February, which was fantastic. Very warm February for us, very little rainfall, but the community continues to rack up the numbers. To date, based on the May declaration of Stage 3, we're 34% conservation overall. I thought I'd throw this graphic in there. It's been interesting to follow this. It is a 12-month production, total moving production. And so where we are right now, the last 12 months, our average right now is 10,000, just over 10,000 acre feet for the year. We are very close to where we were in 1991 with 50% conservation, all out, outdoor watering ban, water cops, the whole, panic in the community. And we are at that level with very few regulations and really a community that is on board and understands where we're going. And I feel like that is to be commended. That is an impressive thing to look at. So when we talk about the fact that for those we haven't gone far enough or we've gone too far, I think this kind of really shows how well we've done. I mean, this is a community that really gets it, and to say that we've already gotten to levels where we were in 91 is pretty impressive. I mean, we've had modest community growth. Is certainly an impressive statistic. So our water supply strategy, we should go over this, is to move the community towards a 35% conservation in April. With that, we'll be looking to secure water to head off shortages in 2018 should conditions remain dry. We currently have adequate supplies to get us through this year and next year. So the goals in the water supply strategy is to try and delay the expansion of desal from 3125 to something greater. And so we discussed these costs last time. Roughly, we believe it's somewhere in the $45 million range to increase the facility from 3125 to 7500. And the big driver to that is the scheduled driver is the distribution improvements. That we believe to take about 18 to 24 months to be able to put in the necessary transmission mains to get that water up and out of our low zone and into the upper parts of the city. So our tools are, of course, demand management, which we've been doing through conservation, and then supply management. So we're going to dive into demand management. So what we're hoping to kind of talk about here is, and get some feedback on, is plan Stage 3 amendment. So amendment to our Stage 3, recognizing the new conservation target of 35% and no additional regulations at this time. So as I go through the next few slides, feel free to chime in, ask questions. So previously, we went through a phased approach to regulations, and we wanted to kind of lay those out, and also to development restrictions. And we went through all of those last time. In particular, December 16th, 2014, since all of this stuff is online, we just want to connect anybody to this. April 14th, 2015, and May 5th, 2015, we talked in great detail about lawn moratoriums and what kind of savings we could get from those, along with development restrictions and what kind of savings could come out of those. And so all that information is available, but we set it up in a tiered structure. So if for one reason or another we weren't meeting our supply target, or something changed with our supplies, we could have these tools to implement. I think we've been very fortunate in a community that's already meeting those without any additional regulations. But we looked at prohibiting lawn watering with limited exception. That would be schools and parks where there was more of a public and safety issue. Limited irrigation of trees and shrubs to high-efficiency irrigation systems, limit irrigation of trees and shrubs to hand watering only, and then the worst-case scenario, prohibitive outdoor water use. So that was kind of the phased approach and different elements with regulations we looked at. Then as for development, we discussed limits on building permits for new pools, voluntary or mandatory deferral of aesthetic landscaping for new projects, no building permits for projects with net new water use, and no new water meters. We went through these issues, and ultimately we arrived at the determination that the community was already achieving the level we were looking for, and these were unnecessary at that time. We still believe that's true. We will bring this back in April, but we just wanted to check in with the council and confirm that there wasn't any changes. So,
Mayor? Mm-hmm. Thank you. So, Mr. Hagmark, you're putting me in mind of an email I was copied on that was sent to you by a woman who, in earnest, was asking, how are we allowing new development when we're in a drought? And I think the slide before referred to no new net use. And if you could just expound on that a little bit for the public, who they do wonder, well, how are we allowing some new housing units if we're all so desperate for water? Just to let us know. Thanks.
Madam Mayor, Councilman Rio, when we looked at this last year, new development added about 30 acre-feet of demand to our community, and that's a community that uses 10,000, and it's basically less than 1% and was deemed insignificant. I mean, to really completely shut down that whole economic part of our community didn't really produce a significant amount of water, and that was where we landed last year, and that we will be bringing those statistics back to you in April, but that really hasn't changed. Development in Santa Barbara is actually a very small, and when we find most of these projects going on, their net usage is, if it does increase, is actually pretty small because of all the energy efficient fixtures that they're required to install.
Thank you for that. And so what you also answered that I wasn't anticipating was that we are keeping an eye on it, and it's part of your regular reporting back to us. Mm-hmm. Thank you. So again, it stands that if there, what would trigger the need to implement any of these regulations on development or regulations on water use, obviously impacts to our water supply, interruptions or shortages not foreseen. And so certainly we're going to be watching this closely. One of the things that I think I want to bring to the council's attention is particularly related to Cachuma. As Cachuma gets down to the levels it's at, it's going to become challenging to move water through that lake, most specifically to store water in that lake, because of the evaporation that's going on. I'm going to go into much more detail on that, but that is one example where we may not be able to, we may have plenty of water in San Luis Reservoir, but not be able to get enough of it here during key times, potentially August and September, we're keeping an eye on that. And if that's the case, we may be back to the council to implement something temporary, maybe for 3 or 4 weeks, to try and get the community just to reduce, because of, not that we're out of water, but that we don't have the conveyance capacity to get it here. And I'll go into much more detail on that, but I just wanted to kind of set the stage for
what we're looking at. And then, of course, shortages, some significant changes in our water supply. State regulations right now, it's one of the challenges with Northern California getting rain is it's kind of created two different states. We have the haves and the have-nots. And so it does make the regulations a little more challenging. But right now, we don't anticipate any significant changes in regulations. Currently, our requirement for Santa Barbara is 12% conservation. We obviously far exceed that. But we don't anticipate any significant changes in the coming months. So on the demand management, kind of a summary to that, we're looking at going from 25 to 35. Our schedule is to come back in April and May for implementation of that through an amendment to our Stage 3 declaration. And then, of course, keeping in mind that we also have proposed rates that will go into effect in July, and people will see them in their bills in August, and that will have another element of conservation attached to it as well. And so at this point, I want to just pause and see if there's any comments or questions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When we talk about targets, Mr. Hadmark, do the targets trigger action by themselves, or there a target by which we measure our success and community success? Because right now we're in a position where, kind of a community esprit de corps has taken us to the level we're at, and I fully predicted this, so that the people were so involved in the community that they would get there without a lot of real punitive things. But unfortunately, as we go forward and people spend less money on water, then we find ourselves having to raise. I mean, it's just a very frustrating cycle. So how do we put this message out about the 35%? We are getting there, obviously, on our own. But how do we do it without making it seem like, if you don't keep it up, if you don't get there, we're going to come after you again? I mean, it's kind of been a, not an intentional pattern, obviously, but the community does deserve a bit of a pat on the back for the efforts it's put forward as a collective. So I've kind of wondered about that. So my question really is, does the new level at 35% indicate a trigger for other methods of doing whatever we have to do going forward?
Councilmember Ross, if we weren't achieving it, like if we were at 26 right now and moving to 35, we'd obviously be presenting some regulations and other things to get us there. But it is the message is continue to do what you're doing, whatever it is working. And really what we're doing is adjusting our conservation target to what the community is already achieving. Is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Councilmember Rouse, I think the messaging is very important, and that's something that we're looking at moving forward with an amended Stage 3 and also with our rate noticing to really honor our community for the significant achievements that they've had. And really on a statewide level, we've done very well as a community. So that's something that we'll continue to work with to make sure people don't feel like they're being punished by conserving to this level.
And I think kind of follow up also on the letter Ms. Murillo referred to, because as people do see development, I think it's important to put out the facts that you put out earlier, Mr. Hagmark, about what that really means, where water is used, where it's not used, because you're going to see shovels in the ground. They're going to see pools being built at hotels. You're going to see the things that have probably questionable optics right now, but really are not going to affect the water supply. But I think that even though you do communicate that to us every month, I think, Ms. Warden, your public messaging might be more important than ever.
Is there any other comments? Okay, so supply management, so stepping into the other side of it. Again, this continues to evolve, and I try and keep the council updated on each of the different changes. Last time I was here, I talked about North Delta water, a strong desire to go after that. There appears to be an abundance of it. But one of the challenges that's kind of evolved over the last month is lack of capacity to move any other water through the system. Kind of an interesting twist. There is so much, the allocation statewide has grown to such a point, and the window for actually delivery of supplemental water is just a 3-month window. July, August, and September, and that's a lot of environmental regulations around that kind of holds that 3-month window. And so basically the pump station that we would rely on to move water is at capacity, and if we were to buy water, basically we wouldn't be able to deliver it. So we've already started discussions with opportunities south of the Delta. It does come with that return component. Basically, it's like leasing water, and so we have to return it one day. And we're obviously hoping not to do that, but it is a secure source. That water is already sitting in San Luis Reservoir, and so the risk associated is very low. And so under the assumptions of a 35% conservation target and the state water allocation now at 45% as of March 17th, we certainly are hopeful it will continue to go up at this point, but that's where it stands now. Our state water allocation, it would be 1,485 acre feet, and which would mean we'd need to purchase about 2,000 acre feet of additional water. We'd probably pursue something similar to what we did last year with the Antelope Valley East Kern. They are another of state water contractor, similar to our Central Coast Water Authority. They have a significant Table A allocation, and so have been very open to leasing water.
If the state figure you cite is all because of optimal snowpack?
Yes, in Northern California, yeah. And I have a graphic to kind of show where Northern California is, yeah. So the allocation, if it hits 50%, up until like 2 hours ago when I had a meeting on this issue, we were hoping to get back, you might remember the water we have stored with Dudley Ridge. It's a groundwater banking program. We were hopeful if you hit 50%, they had mentioned before that would be kind of a trigger for them being able to return that water. And now they're getting kind of soft on us again. Yeah, maybe we can get you your water back. We won't be able to do it until October. We need to know, I think now, if we have that water or not. We're going to continue to approach them and see if there isn't something we can do to guarantee that water delivery. But we have 1,285 acre feet of water at that groundwater bank, and it'd be certainly nice to get that back now. So speaking to the Northern California precipitation, this is an index of 8 weather stations that keep track of the precipitation. So as of March 15th, they're sitting at like 48 inches of precipitation based on this kind of an index. An average year is 50 inches, and so it's been interesting is the discussion about the above average rainfall, but really it's tracking pretty close to average. And at this point, it looks pretty dry in Northern California as well right now. So it's likely they may finish right around average, not a little bit before, but certainly not a banner year like, 97, 98, where they got 82 inches of rain up there, or the 82 to 83, where they got 88 inches. So Lake Cachuma, big progress in Lake Cachuma. Happy to report that I think it has the same amount of water as it had last month, which is a good thing. Barge relocation was approved by COME on March 7th. A notice to proceed has been issued to the contractor, and so we're very excited to see that work is underway and anticipate the relocation being complete by mid-June. That is a major milestone to make sure that we can continue to move the water that we have to the south coast. So I'm going to take some time here to talk a little bit about the lake and what's left in the lake. And I apologize for the graphic, but this is something that the county puts out, and I'm just going to have to work with it. Basically, of the remaining water, the first bucket, if you want to call it, is the unallocated water. This is water that has entered into the project via the Tecolote Tunnel. So basically tunnel infiltration has come into the project. And the arrangement this year with the Bureau is for this water to be used to make up for the evaporation on the lake. So nobody gets this water. It's not being allocated to the various water agencies. Instead, it's kind of going to pay the bills first, and the bills being evaporation. This water will get us through about mid-July. And then after that, the only water in the lake that will evaporate will be carryover water. Minimum pool and the B&A, A&A, that's basically the downstream users' water that they have stored in the lake. It does not evaporate. So The challenge is of that 7,000 acre feet that sits in the lake, because our community has done a great job conserving, we actually own a big portion of that, which puts us in a pretty significant risk of losing a lot of that to evaporation come mid-July. And so that's one of the ongoing discussions we're having with the county and the Bureau and the other member agencies, which is trying to create a situation where the lake is not a hostile place to have water. Because we certainly have purchased and have a lot of state water in San Luis Reservoir we could deliver, but that water too, if it stays in the lake for more than 30 days, is subject to the entire lake's evaporation. And so that's actually a pretty alarming number. We have about 3,000 of that 7,000 acre feet is just the city's water. And based on the kind of evaporation we see in July, August, and September, you could lose that water really quick. And so we're trying to figure out best way to manage that water so that we're not subject to a 50% loss of it because of the evaporation equation that is currently being used. Another significant issue is the fish account. This is the remaining water to satisfy the Hilton Creek fish project. This is significant because the Bureau has been asking for about a year and a half, 2 years now, to be able to reduce the flows to Hilton Creek in order to ensure that we have adequate supplies for the fish. Unfortunately, NIMS has not, I think NIMS and the Bureau were all betting on El Nino because there's been no reductions in the amount of water being released for fish. And unfortunately, based on their current release, we will be out of water for fish come mid-March. Mid-May, we will be out of water, and that is catastrophic in my mind. We have done so much to protect and rebuild this species of steelhead that are here, and to just all of a sudden have no water and have to turn it off is just ridiculous. And so I know the Bureau is trying to engage NIMS and trying to get some compromise. The city is very supportive of that, and we'll be sending a letter to the Bureau and NIMS and the Board of Supervisors advocating our position that a compromise needs to come up that recognizes the need to continue to provide some water for fish, and also the need probably to use the minimum pool to continue to satisfy that need. And I think striking the balance is important here. We've invested way too much in trying to protect this species, and at this point, it continues to be roughly what it ended up being. It's 250 acre feet a month is released for fish. That's about enough for 1,000 single-family residential homes for a year. So 12,000 properties could be served by the amount of water that's being released. And I'm only saying that to put it in context, not to pit one against the other. This is important. We need to continue to provide water for fish. It's unfortunate that there's been no adjustments to that this entire time. But the downstream users' water is planned. They're planning to release this probably in August, and they're planning to release all of it. So come probably October 1st, there will be no downstream water being stored in the lake, or very minimal. And then there's the minimum pool, and the minimum pool is kind of this mysterious pot of water. It is owned by the Bureau of Reclamation. They're the ones who get to determine how this water is used. And currently the discussion is what is the contract recognizes this 12,000 acre feet threshold. That is not what we need to continue to convey state water through the lake. And so one of the challenges that we're having is, should our carryover water or our state water be evaporating in order to keep this 12,000 acre feet in the lake? We believe that what's needed to pass water through that lake is somewhere around 6,000 to 7,000 acre feet is what's needed to pass water through the lake. And so, again, arguing for a compromise, we do believe it's critical to keep water in the lake. It's critical to use it as a conveyance system. But does it really need to stay at 12,000? That's where we kind of are in discussions right now. Right now, the position of the county is that it needs to stay at 12,000 at all costs. It shouldn't be used for fish. It shouldn't be used for evaporation. It just needs to sit there at 12,000 acre feet. They see it as an important
economic attraction and an important environmental asset, and it needs to be held at that elevation. So that's kind of the discussion that's going on now. Is there any questions on all that? Okay.
So the fish release quantity isn't, it's not authorized to come out of that minimum dead pool?
No. The minimum pool is held separately. It could, at the Bureau's discretion, be used, and that's what we want to write the letter and encourage them to use that.
Is there any kind of physical constraint? Is it below the spill gates or anything? It's just a paper restriction. Oh, interesting.
And this conversation is a tense one. This is where the dialogue or the conversation amongst the county, the San Ynez River folks, not basically ID1 and the parent district, and the South Coast is prickly. And so I think it's important that we do the best we can to have those conversations quietly and really, really listen to each other, because this is where we could end up with poking our finger into the sea anemone and having it just pucker up and us not end up in as cooperative a mode as we need to get as we are up against it here. So that's just where we are, and it's painful. But this is, as Mr. Hagmark said, the Bureau's water to allocate, but all of those different interests have a real perceived stake in it, although it is Bureau of Reclamation will make the call. And it's just a horrible thing.
Mr. Dominguez?
I'm sorry I don't have anything clear. I mean, and I'm in participating in these various boards and such, and I wish I had something simpler and clearer to say, well, this is what we ought to do. But what I can say is that's my sense of things right now, is that we need to be tender here. Obviously, we have to be tough, and we're everybody's up against it. So, and this fish issue, it's really sad that we're so late to making the next decision, to making the triage decision that Mr. Hagmark's talking about, of providing the absolute minimum for those fish. This amazing effort that's gone on for decades. And how do we take care of them? And there's even been some conversation about capturing them and putting them in a hatchery, and when you get down to the worst case scenario. As I say, I wish I had something where I go, oh, this is what we ought to do. But that listening and that tenderness at this point, I think, is going to be important for trying to maintain full circle of communication to get through this, obviously turning out to be a worst case scenario.
Mr. Dominguez?
Thank you. Can I ask a question about the water system demand slide? Showed the 30% reduction for month of February.
This one or back further?
Back further, another 3 slides back. One more. So the 34% cumulative average, can you explain that to me, please?
So we declared May 5th, 2015, we declared a stage 3 drought emergency. From that point on, we have been monitoring how much conservation the community has been doing and kind of keeping that running average going. And so cumulative, it's been 34% reduction from the 2013 water usage. And this is the number that we report to the state on a monthly basis.
So what are you accumulating here? Those are the months since the declaration was made?
Yes.
So that's about how many months?
Well, May 5th would be 12 months.
So in the last, and we're in March, April, so in the last 10 months, we've used 34% total water than we would have used in 2013 for those same 10 months of...
We've used 34% less water than we used in 2013.
And that's for a 10-month period. And I know you probably look at it month by month because water demands fluctuate.
Correct. The biggest savings came in the summer months when you have most of the discretionary water use. During those months, we were racking up over 35% conservation, and that's why this month when we have 30%, it didn't really move our cumulative average now that much because it's a pretty small water use month.
I see. And so to achieve 35%, again, we'd really be relying on the summer months? Okay. And what would we have to hit in the summer months to hit that 35%? Would it have to be lower than 35 to hit an annual cumulative 35%?
We would probably need over 35. I mean, we were 38. I'm trying to remember some of the numbers. 38, 39 last year was what we were hitting in the summer months. And it's there's so much water used, it makes a huge difference year round. And so I think at the same point, if we're hitting those kind of numbers this summer, we'll be fine.
We were hitting 38 or 39, so in the winter we were conserving less?
Yeah, there's less discretionary outdoor water use, so it typically goes down to around 30. We've been averaging 29, 30%.
Okay, can I see the projected supply strategy? I think it's 3 slides up. So where does the Lake Cachuma water, which color is that?
So this is the remaining carryover water, the Lake Cachuma water that we have been able to basically from prior years we're able to carry forward because of conservation. And so this is the water that right now one of our biggest concerns is subject to significant evaporation in the lake come July. And so we're concerned we could lose upwards of 50% of that just to evaporation. Right. The prior years, the dark blue here is the entitlement that was granted of the lake, and then the light blue is what we were able to carry forward from prior years.
So in 2016, about how many acre feet is that light blue?
It was like 4,000, 30-something, 3,000. I have it somewhere. $3,500.
Did you have another question, or?
Yeah, I'm just trying to read this really tiny print. So, and the carryover is about 7,000. So if we were to lose 50% of the 7,000, we'd be maybe a couple hundred short or long, give or take.
Yeah, and basically what we'd be looking at doing is you'd be taking water from 2017. We'd have to import more water to make up for that loss, and therefore needing to buy additional water this year. And that's the challenge with this, is that what we're trying to get out of the Bureau and the county is how exactly are you going to manage this so that we can understand the game, so that we can purchase the appropriate amount of water and plan accordingly. And right now it's been difficult to figure out what that is, if it's going to be. And
I was trying to piece together the timing. If you can go back to the Lake Cachuma slide, because it looks like the fish release that was supposed to be in the spring or summer, or what's the time frame for the fish release?
Yeah, it'll start in August.
So, and it almost seems like from what you're describing, or at least how I understand it, is the people who go first may end up being in a better position because of some of the minimums required by some of these pieces. So the bottom brown part, the
minimum pool?
Minimum pool, if you don't get yours out before we hit that level, you're not going to get it out depending on the county's position. And who has priority? I mean, the fish is kind of a small amount, but is there a prioritization, or is it up to the governing boards to decide who gets to take water out if it gets to the point where a bunch is evaporated?
Right, and that's the current equation, and that goes back to the contract managing Cachuma, is that the carryover water will take the evaporation. And so it's one thing when the lake is big and there's future entitlements, because that equation spreads it over future entitled water. But when you get down and all the future entitlements gone, all that's left is carryover, and that carryover water has to take the full burden of the evaporation on all those different
bodies of water, it ends up being significant. And one of our challenges is trying to get something straightened out, in particular for next year, because next year the evaporation, we could look into a situation where as fast as we can put water into the lake for the state water, it would be evaporating. I mean, you get up into there's some, evaporation in the summer hits 20, 25 acre feet a day. We could put in about 40 acre feet a day. So it pretty much would be evaporating as soon as we got it in the lake. And so that's one of the big challenges with how to manage this.
And the supply management slide that you shared with us, which showed the state water, the south of Delta water, is that for, what's the timeline there? That would be to replace the...
That would be for the shortfall in 2018. It would be our backup water for 2017 should something happen to one of our supplies.
And how sure are these supplies?
Which ones?
So, for example, the south of Delta water purchase, that's the one from the San Luis Obispo Reservoir?
Yeah, it's fairly secure. The AVEX the Antelope Valley East Kearns already approached CCWA and told them they have 10,000 acre feet of water in the lake that's available for lease.
And I just wonder, and I'm concerned that they're not going to have the same type of problem we have in terms of evaporation.
Yeah, the water in San Luis Reservoir is magic. It doesn't evaporate. That's just how they manage the state water system. And so keeping it there until we need it has been an important part of managing our supplies.
And that's dependent on the legislative framework and what changes may come down the pike.
Right.
So, and I'm very concerned, and that's why I'm asking some of these questions that I'm not sure I would have asked earlier. And the Dudley Ridge, you said there's a triggering condition. There's a certain amount of water they have to achieve in order to release our water?
Yes, we've approached them every year to get that water back that we banked with them. And in prior years, they said, we get a 50% allocation. We'll entertain returning your water. And so we're kind of pushing for that 50% number because that's what they verbally told us, but contractually they have no obligation to return it. And so we are certainly hopeful, but if they can't commit to it, then we're going to have to find that water elsewhere, and that's it's unfortunate.
Can you explain what that 50% allocation means?
The city bought into 3,300 acre feet a year of state water entitlement. And each year, by May 1st, the state determines how much of your state entitlement you're going to get. And so right now, as of March 17th, they have determined that we will get 45% of our 3,300 acre feet that we have bought into the system. And
so if they say it's less than 50%, then it doesn't trigger Dudley?
I don't think there'll be any chance we'll get it back if they keep it at 45. If it goes over 50, I think we got a strong chance of getting it back. We may have to buy it back, which kind of doesn't sit well with me. But at this point in the game, I think I'm going to have to buy water one way or another.
So if I understand correctly, if the state gives us more water, then they will give us water. But if the state doesn't give us?
Yeah, the way it works, Dudley Ridge is a groundwater bank in Kern County. And they have it's a huge farming area, and they have a state water allocation. And so the logic here is that the larger the state water allocation is, the less their farmers need water from the groundwater basin. Therefore, they have the capacity to pump from the basin into the California aqueduct, making that water available to us. So that's kind of the game, shell game, yeah.
I got that now. Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
I just need a little more on the various interests that are involved in this carryover or the evaporation question and the minimum dead pool. I'm not understanding how the San Ynez Water Conservation District is impacted by all of this. They're going to get their amount, and it's going to be released out of the lake, and that's it. They're not even a player in the minimum dead pool, as I understand it. So I don't understand how that's complicating these regional discussions.
Their stake in it is that the minimum pool provides the head that they need to do their downstream releases. So if they can keep the minimum pool there, say, for example, they get 4,000 acre-feet of water next year, if the minimum pool is at 12,000, it will give them the head they need to get that 3,000 acre-feet down to the groundwater basins that they want to get it into.
Just because of the elevation of the water in the lake.
Right.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, keep going. All good questions.
Yes. This slide, pulled this slide out. I think we looked at it a few years ago, but just interesting to show how the lake elevation this time around has paralleled the last drought, 86 to 93. And we were doing great, following it perfectly until miracle month of March showed up in 91 and put 50,000 acre-feet of water into the lake with a 23-inch rainfall in March. And for some reason, it didn't materialize this time. It's just unfortunate. We were doing so well following each other here. But there is some challenges with showing parallels here. Obviously, back when in the last drought, they were not doing fish releases, but they also did not have state water imports. There were a lot of different ways that the lake was operated. It's just been more interesting that the lake has been following. And I can say at the end of March, I think we can officially say that this is the new drought of record, and we have now gone into completely new territory with the lake.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Lucky. Gibraltar Reservoir, we did get about 200 acre-feet of inflow from the last little rain we got, which was just telling us, it's unfortunate, the watershed was just getting to that point where it's starting to get saturated, where we'd get a little bit of rain and it would start to run off. We saw some runoff until the rain stopped, and then the creeks dried up again. So we did get 200 acre-feet. We'll take that. But, yeah, if we were to get 2 to 3 inches right now, I think we would see some significant runoff into the reservoir, and unfortunately it doesn't seem to be in the forecasts. Right now we're going to hold on to that water. It is in difficult shape, but we're going to hold on to that water in case we need to use it for any interruptions in the barge relocation were to occur, if there's any delays to that. And potentially we might be looking at this water to help meet that peaking that we're concerned about in August and September, if there's any restrictions in state water imports. So recycled water, some unfortunate news here. The contractor failed the 60-day performance test of the facility. They were unable to reach the 2.5 million gallons per day that was required under the contract. They were only able to get it up to 700,000 gallons a day. We have given the contractor 7 days. We've been going back and forth with him for a couple months now, but we've given him 7 days basically to give us a work plan. It's due by 5 o'clock today to address these issues, to let us know how he's going to do that. But what the biggest unfortunate part of that is that at 700,000 gallons a day, it goes a long ways to help out with our water demands in the recycled water system, but will not be able to meet our peaking demands this summer. Basically, starting in May through September, we will need to add potable water to the recycled water system to meet demands. And we are working hard to bring on someone to help us with the operation of this, to see if we can't eke some more performance out of it. We are hopeful in the fact that they're optimistic that they can get a little more production out of it. And then we also have the Valverde non-potable well. So with that, we're getting close. We feel like we need about 1.5 million a day, 1.5 million to 2 million MGD. We're hopeful we can get up to 1.5 million, but it's going to be a lot of work to get there, and it's just unfortunate that we're here right now in that position.
I can ask, what's the cause of that underperformance?
The membranes at this point are not meeting what they were designed to do, and so the membrane manufacturer is actually Dow Chemical or Dow. They're well known for their work in membrane filtrations. They're especially known for their RO membranes. But they have a decent reputation out there, but these membranes don't seem to be performing up to what they were designed to do.
And our course?
We'll be talking about that, today. So the desal project on-site, underground conduits and piping is still ongoing. Major underground work, though, is to be completed in April. Off-site, the treatment units are basically being wrapped up. We're going to be sending someone to the assembly plant to take a look at those before they are packaged up in April and put on a ship, and that will arrive in May. The offshore work is something that we've been pounding on the contractor about, and is finally getting that work scheduled for April. This is time-sensitive work that needs to happen, and certainly they have to be sensitive to runion runs and snowy plovers, and so those are all things that are impacting, and we're watching carefully for scheduling, sequencing for that. Contaminated soils continues to be ongoing. No surprises at this point. Just as they do trenching, that soil has to be packaged up and trucked off. And the schedule is currently for production in October of 2016.
I just had a quick question about the desal plant. Is there any concern or risk that the membrane issue with the recycled plant is an issue for the desal plant? Is there any overlap in?
No, completely different types of filters. We don't have that concern, no. And then an update on the water sales agreement discussion with Montecito. We continue to go back and forth. We did give them a revised term sheet on Monday. We've been going back and forth, and they are very eager to respond. So, but we've had no significant progress to report other than that.
Just one other tangent on this. I've had a number of people have spoken to me about their concern that this is in a black box, and I know we have a non-disclosure agreement with the Montecito Water District at this point, but I do think before the next drought update, we should revisit that issue with the Montecito Water District, because I think there's just a lot of concern in the public at large as to what's going on with these negotiations, and I hope that they would be characterized accurately for everybody's concern. And I think that there's a risk now that the fact that no one knows what's going on gets people very concerned, and rumors spread and positions become mischaracterized. And I just think we've approached this whole issue of water strategy with utmost transparency throughout the whole process. And I think we've gotten tremendous cooperation from the community because of that. These regular, absolutely open-ended conversations about water supply result in confidence in people feeling as though the information they have to understand the process is available readily. And I just think this is getting closer to that, to the need for that, and would urge us to make that known to our partners in this conversation about the need for transparency in this.
Water main flushing program, I may have mentioned we are looking into some responses to and concerns that we have about water quality.
I want to ask about desal before he switches.
Okay, ask about desal, but I want to note the time. We have another very important item, a closed session, and a 6 o'clock item. So if we can try to move things along, that would be great, but go ahead.
Projected supply strategy. Can you go back to that slide, please? What is the acre footage for the desal for 2017? What's your forecast there?
3125.
And then in 2018, it's about the same?
The same, yes. 3125.
Are there any of these other sources that could fluctuate greatly? What's the source that you'd be most concerned about becoming less viable?
I mean, to be honest with you, I'm concerned about all of them. Our groundwater is is, we continue to pump our groundwater pretty hard right now. We just recently had a well go down. It's been running straight for 3 years, and we kind of expected it. It was it's going to go one of these days, and it finally did, the San Roque well. And, when you're running equipment like that 24/7 and not giving any breaks, you're going to start to see failures. And so we're pushing our groundwater basin right now, and we're seeing some of those effects and trying to stay ahead of the maintenance on those.
And I'm concerned, one of the answers you gave earlier about 1%, that's kind of not a marginal 1%. That's the most important 1%, in that it's the most expensive water in terms of the dollar costs, the energy costs, the potential impact on the ecosystem, because if it's groundwater, we could have incursions. So I don't want to mislead the people watching this meeting that, every 1% is about the same. And given kind of the fragility of some of these supply sources, I'm concerned with the desal, in that it looks like, just looking at your report, so we have the capacity to bump it up to 7,500 acre feet. And then we could go up beyond that if there was to be an agreement with Montecito or another purchaser. Is 10,000 the max?
10,000 is what the facility is permitted for, yes.
Okay. And how long would it take? It would take 18 months to bump it up to 7,500?
Yeah, that's our best estimate right now. The improvements to the facility, the actual treatment side, would be about 12 months. That's what we have. Our agreement with IDE is to do the expansion in 12 months. And then we have the distribution improvements, which we think would take a little longer, just because we're talking about putting in some pretty major transmission mains to try and get that water now out of the low zone, because you're basically creating water where it was pushing it backwards to the system. And so certainly there's things that we could do if we were in an emergency. We could put that transmission main on the side of the road, and it could be temporary there if we're really talking about that kind of situation. But we're hoping that we're planning far enough ahead that we're not in that position at all.
So for Montecito to enter agreement with us, we'd have to expand the plant at the current schedule.
Yes, any expansion. So for us, anything over 3125 is going to require a transmission main to get it out of the low zone. We can handle 3125 in our lower part of the city. The Padre pump station is going to be able to manage the winters when we have excess desal water and we need to get it out. But once you step over 3125, we really start to run into, we don't have room or demand for it in the low zone. We have demand for it in the city, but you got to get it out of the lower part of the city. And so that's where this transmission main becomes critical. And so if Montecito were to want to come in, that transmission main would need to be installed. And that's why that's part of the discussions that we're having.
So it's really hitting me here where it's kind of an all or nothing. It's literally when it rains, it pours, or feast or famine situation, where a lot of these systems are so interconnected. The way you described Dudley and their connection with the state system, either we're all doing really well, or all the systems are subject to breaking down and loss of supply. So I'm really concerned, and I'm wondering, the one thing that we can change immediately would be conservation rates. Do we have kind of a timeline of when impacts on the different sources would take place, or when we'd have notice of them? And part of the problem, it seems like, with what we experience with the barge is there's a lot of things that we kind of take for granted in terms of our time frame and our ability to get access to those sources. But do we have a worst case timeline when our sources would collapse in terms of our ability to take advantage of them?
No, we don't have any. Trying to see if I can answer this. So the wells, there are 7 in operation. And
that's our most autonomous supply?
Yes. That's our only truly local supply on this side of the mountains. Gibraltar sits with water in it. It's very difficult to treat, but it sits with about a month and a half worth of water in it. And so we could bring down that, and we've been kind of utilizing that as kind of the plan B. And then obviously we have the water that we've been storing in Cachuma that belongs to us, and then the state water that we're importing every month.
And the amounts you said from Val Verde, it doesn't sound like I was thinking maybe we could slow that down and save it for a non-rainy day and take some of the Cachuma water. But when you say it's 1.5 to 2 million gallons a day, can you transfer that back to AFY for me now that I've got used to acre feet?
The Valverde well produces about 250 acre feet a year. That's what its production is, which is about 200 gallons per minute. So what our plan with Valverde well is to use it as a peaking supply in the summers for the recycled water system, because it's not a potable well. The water is not drinkable without significant treatment. And so we've been utilizing it to kind of help out the recycled water system. We used it all last year, but we have water right now. The recycled water system treatment plant is keeping up with the demands now. But once we get into the summer months, when obviously that usage peaks, that's when we were going to bring the well online, and we'll use that to augment. And it does not come out of a groundwater basin that we currently pull potable water from. It's an isolated basin.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask council to hold the rest of their questions till they're completely done with their presentation. Go ahead.
How about I just bring this back another time? We can talk about that later. Main breaks are down in February. As we kind of talked about before, there is a seasonality element to our main breaks, but it is nice to see that seasonality start to kick in a little bit. We had a very mild February, and we kind of saw that with only 7 breaks. Again, I'm going to continue to bring this back. We're going to have a bigger discussion on this later. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Ms. Ward to walk you through our updates on our conservation program.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, my name's Madeline Ward, and I'm the Water Conservation Coordinator, and I'll try to go through these quickly. Last week, we celebrated National Fix a Leak Week. This is a national reminder to check for and fix leaks both inside and out. It's a campaign that was started by the EPA's WaterSense program, of which we are a partner. And nationwide, minor household leaks account for more than 1 trillion gallons of wasted water every year, which is more than 15 Lake Cachumas. We encourage all of our community members to check for leaks both inside and out, and one of the best tools to do so is your water meter, which is generally located in your sidewalk. If you observe the meter when water is not supposed to be in use, you can look for the usage indicator, which is often a white triangle here on the screen, or we also have a blue snowflake variety that you may see, or a crescent moon. So if anything's moving on the meter and really water should not be being used, then that might indicate a leak, because that indicates the water is going through the meter. It's also wise to take a picture of the meter or write down the numbers, because it functions similar to an odometer in a car. And then if you leave for work, you leave for an extended period of time where you know water should not be used, come back and read it again to see if it went up at all. This is also a good way to see how much water you use for various activities. We have folks that will read the meter, go to bed at night when they know the irrigation system will come on, and then they'll read it in the morning to see how much water the irrigation system uses just for one night. One of the most common leaks inside the home is a toilet leak. We estimate that about 20% of all toilets leak, and the average leak is usually about 200 gallons per day, so it's a significant leak. The 3 most common leaks for a toilet are a flapper leak. The flapper is the little rubber piece at the bottom of the tank, and these can either be the wrong brand, they can be worn, or they can be warped, and they will let water go through the toilet and go down to the sewer, and it's silent, and it's very difficult for you to see or hear. There's also an overflow tube leak. The overflow tube is also in the tank, and if the water level in the tank is more than an inch around the tube, let's say it's right at the level of the tube or over the tube, then that means the water will spill over, especially overnight when the water pressure rises. You can also have an excessive flush volume, and that's generally if you have the wrong brand of flapper for your toilet, where it will drain the entire tank rather than just the amount of water that your toilet was designed for. So getting the correct flapper is very important, and they usually cost about $2. So drought regulations do require that a full irrigation of landscape occurs at night or early morning, but we do always encourage landscapers or homeowners to check the irrigation system when they are awake during the day so they can see if there's anything that may need to be repaired. So it's good to just run a test system, 1 minute for each zone, look for any sprinkler heads, missing emitters, cut drip lines, or saturated areas. And the city is here to help look for leaks. We have free water checkups available for homes and businesses. And for do-it-yourselfers, we have a bounty of information on our website, including various videos that are all listed there about reading your meter, checking for leaks, fixing leaks. And that can all be found at santabarbaraca.gov/leaks.
Thank you. We do have a public comment speaker slip. Ms. Hauser, if you'd like to come on up. Now, save water. Is that what you wanted to say? Save water, right? Okay, good. All right, thank you. All right, we'll close the public comment. Any other comments or questions from the council? We went through a lot, I know, during the process. Okay. Yes, Mr. Dominguez.
I'd like to see maybe a menu of other options, either if we can move forward kind of the conservation goals a little bit, or whatever you might have in store based on the situation.
Great. Thank you very much. There's a lot of information, a lot of good questions. Appreciate it.